What's going on, people? Welcome to 137 Works, and today we're going to have a listen to this. And find out how exactly I got that sound. It's basically going to be a walkthrough of my lo-fi kind of master chain, how I get the overall lo-fi sound on my beats, and just some rough things that I do on each track. If that sounds interesting, stick around. Okay, so yeah, here we are. We're not going to be looking at the actual composition of the beat itself. You know, it's a cool little beat, it's nice little chops and stuff like that in there, but it's more about how I got it to sound like I did, and how I get like my overall sound when it comes to different beats that I make in this kind of lo-fi, boom bap, low bap genre that I've been into recently. I touched on it a little bit in the koala sampler video that I made. I'll leave a link in the description and the little card on the screens here in whichever corner it is, where I talked about basically in that video I showed the same process of what I did to get the sound in koala sampler, but obviously different plugins, different systems and stuff like that. It's a different method in FL Studio, and I talked about in that video showing that in the future. And so here we are. It's essentially just a run through my master channel, what I'm doing on each of the individual channels for the big things like the drums, the bass line, the samples, and kind of, you know, whatever comes next. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. So this is my current master channel. It's not insane. It looks like there's a lot going on there, but there isn't really. There's a couple of tips and tricks that I picked up along the way that I'm applying, and then there's just some other sounds and settings that I found myself. So starting from the bottom is what I usually do. Regardless of genre, these two are always here. I've got a Kajaya House Audio Classic Master Limiter, which is just set to, I think it's -2, and that's just a tip that I picked up from Avicii, funnily enough, back in the day, way back in the day. He had a video on YouTube for Future Music Magazine or something, talking about somebody put him onto this tip where it's just basically stick this on, it sounds fine, and just stick it to 0. I find -2 to be a better place than 0 for most applications, but it's just basically putting a limiter on your master channel, which is just generally good practice. This is the one that I use. Again, I've been experimenting lately. This isn't my, you know, final forever setup, but just it's what I'm using right now. So that's it. Just your limiter on your master channel is just always a good idea to make sure things aren't peaking and clipping and stuff like that. So that's the one that I use. The next one, again, I'm using that free VPS filter that I'm always talking about. It's basically my go-to EQ, and it has been for years. It's just simple. There's just 4 knobs: high pass, low pass, the width, and the resonance. Basically, like what frequency do you want to be cutting and how much, and by like your Q essentially, and the slopes there as well. So what I'm doing here essentially just at 30 hertz, hard cutting it essentially as close as you can get, at least. So I'm using the maximum amount of slope, and I've got 100 and 0% on the width and the resonance, and that's just cutting off basically everything below 30 hertz. Which again, it's another dance music tip that I picked up. I got that from Deadmau5, I want to say, in some Q&A or live stream that he did back in the day, where he's just like, if you're playing your music out on a big club system and all those big huge bass speakers are pumping out all that sub 30 hertz frequency, it's just muddy, not just badness. It's no good for anybody. And I just took that on board. I took that to heart. I was like, if it's good enough for Deadmau5, who is a big proper nerd about all this kind of stuff, like he goes really in depth into like sound quality and having the best sound and all that kind of stuff, and he does actually play at these big venues and stuff. If it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So again, it might not be for everyone, but I was like, it's also that the logic makes sense. It just checks out logically. I understand. I can say like, yeah, that makes sense. Anything that's just low sub 30 hertz, you're not hearing that. That's not really audible, like good frequencies that you might want to be listening to. Like, so it just makes sense. Yeah, that's just pumping out those low end frequencies. That's just going to mix everything up. So first and foremost, there are 2 things that I do. Again, it doesn't have a drastic effect. It's just for kind of cleanliness sake. I don't expect that I'll ever be playing any of these big venues. I don't imagine that I'll ever be playing at like a big stage show like that, or a big night, like have my music pumped out on big nightclubs or anything. But in theory, if they ever are, the beats are ready to go. They've already been gotten ready for that. So next up we have DAWLP, which is essentially just a vinyl simulator. I know other people use like Isotope, and there's some other well-known ones, but this is just the one that I ended up on for whatever reason. Maybe it's free or something, I can't remember, but this is the one that I found, and I found that it did the job for what I needed. Essentially, I was trying to recreate a vinyl sound because, as I mentioned in the previous video where I was talking about not needing vinyl or hardware or anything like that to be able to make cool beats, I still wanted the sound of them. So again, I didn't have any records or anything like that, so I was trying to get the vinyl sound applied to whatever I was using at the time. So I stumbled upon this DAWLP, and it's just got some cool options: amp noise, vinyl noise, scratches, and hum. And you've got different things like amp quality, needle quality, scratches rate, which applies to these obviously, and then ducking, which is your, I'm assuming, just like a sidechain type thing, but I never use it. I just leave it in the middle. You've also got then weird options here that are kind of interesting, like there's an amp hum, I think it is, the hum noise here. If you turn that up, you can also choose between 50 and 60 hertz to simulate if you're on the American or European power grids, which I think is hilarious. Like, you've also got the generators here, which I don't use, and then the cable quality, which I apply a touch of. I think I have down, yeah, like 93%. But again, I'll do a quick demonstration. So if I just mute all the rest of the channels and just play, you'll hear what it's doing, which isn't a lot, but it's something when everything's playing all together. It's just basically applying a little bit of soft amp noise and some crackling, some vinyl static. So basically from left to right, you've got amp noise. So again, I don't have it on an exact number, but I just like a tiny bit above completely missing. So if I turn this up, you get an idea. And then you've got amp quality here, which while it doesn't affect anything while it's playing, it is it will affect it when there's actually music playing. So play everything. See there, it's like an EQ or something. So I'll just have that down a little bit. Noise. So next up is the vinyl noise. So that gives it like a. I think it's supposed to simulate the sound of like a dirty, dusty vinyl that's like just playing before any sound plays. Not the crackles, because again, that's the scratches here, that's the next effect. But you've got needle quality, so say you've got an old worn out needle, like just grinds it up quite a bit. Again, for everyone's personal taste, like it'll be different for everyone, obviously. But that's where it's at for me. I don't think I have it actually enabled because I don't want any low end. Again, same reason I don't have any hum here, so. That's cool, but it's again, it's I don't want any unnecessary random bass frequencies, so it's cool to have the option, but I don't put it in there. And last but not least, we have the scratches, which is just what you might imagine: volume and then the amount of the scratches. So that almost sounds like it's raining on a tin roof. But yeah, I have it not quite as much as that, something like 5%, and then just, you know, something like that. Yeah, so it's not doing too much. Again, the input output gain I haven't touched, the mix is full, and then the cable quality, as I said, is just, if I play the whole thing, again, it simulates like a broken, almost disconnected cable potentially. Just a little touch. Again, it's not super obvious on this specific track, but 93%, depending on the song, how like subtle the song is and samples. If it's a bit more of a mellow vibe, you can hear a bit more of that effect in there. So it's just something like that basically. And yeah, it's nothing groundbreaking. People use vinyl sims all the time. As I said, Isotope is a well-known one, but that's just DAWs for whatever reason, the one that I stumbled upon. Next up is the most kind of, to me, one that I'm most undecided about, and it's the one that since I was provided with the keys for the RX bundle by the guys over at Inphonic, again, link in the description, card on the screen if you want to go check out my coverage of their RX 1200 plugin. I have been messing with their RX 950. It's basically a replica of the Akai S950, and it's basically like you've got your audio bandwidth, the input gain to drive it a bit, a filter, an output level. You can enable mono, and you can also change the brilliance of the audio bandwidth, I think it is. Either way, the point being is that I've been experimenting replacing that as the sound of Decimort, because the reason that I use Decimort is that, number one, it's just genuinely a great bit crusher. It's a great sound of bit crusher. But if you notice the screen here, SP1200 is the preset that I'm using. Now, I've tweaked it. So it's under Classic Box's SP1200. I've tweaked it to be only about 15%, I think it is. Yeah, 15% dry wet mix. And I've turned out the output volume by -2 dB because, again, it's super overwhelming without it. Again, I might need to turn this down in editing, but if I turn it up to, like, say, 50 and full volume, it's just, it's a whole lot. So again, not what I'm personally going for, so just a little bit more subtle. So -15 is the nice bounce that I found previously, and -2 on the volume. Now, without this last one here, this is all sounding very bright, very crunchy, very gritty, and so this is what it would be like. It's a lot. So I was looking for something to warm it up then, and I actually got inspired by Marlo Diggs, his use of the analog heat. He made a video talking about his kind of master output or whatever like that, like it's just generally his chain that he uses, similar to what I'm doing here, but for his hardware effects, and he showed off the analog heat, and he just opened my eyes to the idea of like, okay, putting something that overall saturates the sound and the tone generally, but more than anything takes off a lot of the high end, like just remove some of the harshness from the high end rather than just applying a basic EQ. Like you can get stuff like this one. So this last sound here that I'm using is FabFilter Saturn. Yeah, it's like a saturator, so Saturn, saturator, you can see where the name kind of came from. And yeah, I'm just basically using the lo-fi old Akai O sound, and it's just basically, as I said, the before and after kind of speaks for itself. When you've got this, again, it's just with all the DAWLP and the Decimort, it's just it's got a lot of high end going on. Like for example, if I just take these off, it's not that bad, but it's just a bit dry, a bit boring, a bit sterile. Like, it does add a lot of character to it, but it does add a lot of that high end kind of just overly gritty crunchiness. So if we just enable Saturn while this is playing, you'll see what it just does, that last little thing to just cherry on top sort of thing. You're still getting a bunch of the high end, but there's still a lot of that in there. It's just, it rolls off some of that absolute harshness that can take. So that's essentially the master channel for now. As I said, I'm experimenting with different things, different limiters. I've got Pro L, I've got like some of the UAD limiters and hardware and compressors and stuff like that I've been messing around with, trying out different things. So I'm experimenting with again, the RX 950 from Infonic. I'm just messing with different things there, but it's just for now, at the moment, this is the one that I'm happy with. I actually put off making this video for a little bit longer than I probably wanted to. Again, I've been mentioning it in videos for the last like month or two. Then I've had this idea in the back of my head to do a video kind of showing how I do the mixing and mastering to get the lo-fi sound in FL. But again, yeah, just because I've been experimenting with it so much, and particularly since the S950 kind of came into the mix, I've just been like, well, if I make a video showing how it has been for the last year, that will be how I was doing it previously, but I'm also not sure if I'm sticking with the S950, so what way do I do it? Like, so I thought I'd basically give it the best of both worlds. I'll show you how I've been doing it for the last year and a half or so, but also give the nod to the S950 to just say that I've been thinking about using that, and I've been kind of experimenting with that. So that's the master channel. And then just essentially a similar sort of thing for the drums, the bass, samples, and well, I'll just do drums, bass, and samples. So if you've seen the Koala sampler video before, or if you check it out now since I've linked it and put it in the card or whatever, you will notice that a lot of these kind of techniques I'm applying are basically the same, just some compression, just some EQing, and that's basically all you really need. You can get fancy, you can start doing saturators on drums and blah 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 blah. But for me, again, for my sound, I am experimenting, and I have experimented in the past, tried new and different things, you know. But I've found for the most part this has worked for me. So first of all, this was actually a free plugin, believe it or not. I think it was just before Christmas. UAD gave this out for free. You just had to, as like with everything nowadays, you can't just have anything for free. You had to sign up and give them your email and create an account and stuff like that, and download the UA Connect launcher, I think it was. But otherwise, you get this LA2A. It's modeled after, I think it's just called the LA2A. It's a world famous, renowned studio standard, just iconic compressor essentially. And basically, yeah, I got this for free, and so I was just previously using the Kajera House Classic compressor here. Never had a problem with it, but I liked what I seen with this UA one here. So basically, what we have here is just, again, it's not too much to it. There's not too much to it. It kind of takes a lot of the work out of it. You know, I'm not the best when it comes to compression and stuff like that, but I know how threshold, ratio, attack, release, knee, all the different, I know how a compressor works. I have this thing of like, if it's quicker and it sounds the same or better, then it's obvious. Why would you not use that? So for example, on the drums, if I take away the other effects just for now and just play them as they are completely solo. So that's just that little loop basically, but with the great snare preset. So the one thing that I love about this again is I can mess with all the individual settings every single time I open a track. Like, I can mess with the individual settings, and if it's required, I'll go in and mess around with some of these. But the fact that very often on drums, if you go to drums preset, one of these sounds exactly what I need, it's amazing, and it's typically great snare. A lot of them can kind of just over pump them for my style, but for my personal style of kind of like not too aggressive, chill, kind of low bap, boom bap, hip hop sort of thing, great snare. It's just a great sound. If I could be cheesy and just say that, it just applies a great effect. So again, if I play them and then enable, just gives the emphasis on the snap of the snare. And then the kick drum, again, doesn't do a whole lot for the kick drum, but I make up for that with the filter and the EQ and stuff like that. So that comes next. So again, it's just another filter, VPS filter. Again, it is my go-to. With this one, I'm just rolling off some of the high end, just basically taking off some of that harshness, so we can just have this. That's without. That's with it. Yeah, just very simple. I'd say about, as I always say, about 8,000, 8,500 is it's just rolling off some of the high end there. And then lastly is that trick that I've showed in Koala Sampler, but just basically here in FL Studio. So I'm using a fruity parametric EQ, nothing fancy, none of the big advanced ones that I have, because again, it's just lightweight, it does the job. I'm just very simply boosting the frequency a tiny bit at about 57 Hertz according to this by 20%. And I'm just putting up a little bit just to give the bottom end, the boom, a little bit more boom for that bap. So you're getting that bap from the compressor, and you're getting the boom from the EQ basically, essentially. So you get the final result, which is this. And I think that's fine. I think that works absolutely perfectly. Again, I can mess with all the different mad, like, SSL, UAD. I've got everything in here. I know how it all works. It's not that I'm ignorant on certain techniques or anything, any other ways of doing it. I've just found, again, if it's simple, if it's quick, if it works, and if it sounds good, why overcomplicate it? Do you know, kind of way, like, why do anything crazy? Like, this is my lo-fi kind of template. Like, these two at least are always here. The compressor and the filter start up as part of my kind of lo-fi template here. I have talked in the past about the fact that I don't like templates. That would be more in specific settings per se. Like, again, for time saving, like, yes, I'm always going to have these on a lo-fi beat, so there's always going to be them. The specific settings I might tweak depending on the need. Yeah, like like these are always going to, like, I'm always going to have a compressor and an EQ on a drum kit, for example, so it just makes sense to have them. The specific settings, it starts off by default zeroed out, so the specific settings for how I need to tweak the EQ is going to be different, so I want to have a preset for that, but I will always have an EQ, if that makes sense. So that's that. Up next we will do the bass line, and it's more or less the same. So here's the bass line as it is, just by itself. Kind of get the gist there, and it's basically just the same thing, just in reverse, kind of. So it's got the bass direct preset. It has a VPS filter cutting off just more of the high end there. Sorry, I know that this mixer is a bit in the way, but you can kind of, you get the gist. Yeah, just cutting out at about like 1800, and the parametric EQ is just doing the same thing again. It's that trick that I talked about in the Qualis Abra video. If you don't know it, essentially kicks and snares, they occupy a lot of the same frequency space. They're just going to come crashing down together in a lot of that low end when it comes to the bass line. So the technique that I picked up a long time ago, again, I didn't create it. It's not revolutionary. It's nothing, it's nothing special or like that. It's just, it's a well-known kind of trick to kind of clear up the low end a little bit. It's just essentially when the bass line is plodding along, when the kick drum comes down, instead of having them meet here and fighting with each other, make a little divot in the bass. So as it's coming along, boom, 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 there's just a little divot for it to kick down into. And so that's basically all I'm doing here. The same frequency, 57 hertz, the same amount, 20%, that I boosted in the kick, I'm just taking away on the bass line, essentially. And that just gives you enough space for them to work together. That's basically it. So that's the three things on the bass line. Play the two of them together, you see they go well. And again, it goes together, like, obviously it depends on your mix and stuff like that, how you'll specifically do everything, but mix wise, to get the volumes right. And then samples will just be the same thing. Again, honestly, I know it seems just kind of like, oh yeah, you're not really doing much. But again, it's not what I'm doing. It's the knowledge to know that I should be doing it, and the knowledge to know exactly what to do, if that makes sense. So these four channels here will be the sounds in the song. And as you see, as I click through them, they are basically just all using more or less the same thing, because there's just no need for anything else. Like, they sound good. I'm just using the compressor to bring all the volumes up. So keys for the piano preset in here, a little EQ just to get the right frequencies that I'm looking for. Same thing here, default. So I'm actually just giving it a default a bit, just to basically making it a bit louder, essentially, but like in a compressed way, not just obviously pulling up the volume slider. Otherwise I would just raise the volume slider. And then the VPS filter for this one is looking something like that. Yeah, so more or less the same, just cutting off most of the low end, some of the high end, and then just the theme repeats essentially. So you've got a compressor here doing the same thing. It's on guitar heat for this one, so for whatever reason this one has yeah, so you've got that little, it's like a little horn thing. So obviously there's no horn presets, so the guitar heat to that one. And then a filter to give it that. That's its kind of tone. Because without that, you've got just very quiet. Compressor, filter, brings it up in the mix. And then so lastly, we have just this last little chop here that has another compressor which has the rhythm guitar on it, another VPS filter doing another bit of EQing, but then this time just a classic reverb and delay. And it's just a long-tailed, low-end cut-off reverb and a delay that is 1/2 time. And it just sounds like that. Yeah, and so again, so it's nothing revolutionary. I never, as I always say with these videos, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I'm not, I'm standing on the shoulders of this giant. I've picked up all these tips from someone else, more, advanced people, more knowledgeable people in the game longer than I've been. And it's about just tastefully applying what you know. It's not about, like I always think of it as like there's no big music secrets per se, but I think maybe that's just me now knowing all this kind of stuff. I'm sure if, say, YouTube just recommended this to you, it ended up in your algorithm and you are only just starting off in music, yeah, maybe you might not have known about that EQ trick. trick, and that was some kind of secret that you didn't know about. But the way I think about it for myself is like, yeah, no, I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I don't think I'm doing anything more like impressive or special than anybody else. I am just, I've picked up all this kind of like little bits and pieces of knowledge over the years, kind of through watched YouTube videos, reading magazines. I did a year in college, to be fair, for music back when I was 19, which would have helped a little bit. But yeah, so again, it's when you combine all that, and again, it's always a process. As I said, I'm constantly, even right now, I'm adding and iterating on the process. It's never over. And maybe I'll make another video in another year or two, be like, okay, this is my new process and this is how I do things differently now. But yeah, that's the process for now anyway, and it combines to make a song like this one, and I will end on that by playing us out. So if you enjoyed it, please do leave a thumbs up, subscribe if you're new here, thanks for watching, and goodbye.